What's going on, guys? Jeff here for Mad Hatter's Reef. Today we're going to be taking a look at the top 10 tips for choosing the right saltwater fish for you and your reef tank. But before we jump into that, if this is your first time being here, this is where I talk about everything reef tank related. So if you love the reef tanks like I do, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell so you can be notified every single time that I upload a new video. All right, let's go. Coming in at the number 10 spot, we have adding fish at the right time. Now, when you first get into the hobby, a lot of folks make this mistake of just going to fish store to fish store to fish store and picking up whatever catches their eye. You can do that and have success. I did it with my first tank, and that tank, though, nothing went wrong with it. Very lucky. But sometimes that isn't always the case. And what I usually like to do when I am in the beginning stages of thinking about setting up a saltwater tank is I will create a wish list of fish that I'd like to put in there. And what I will do after I have that wish list put together is I will take that list and turn it into a stocking plan. And typically what I do is I base it off from size, smallest to biggest, and then aggression, most peaceful to semi-aggressive. Not into the aggressive fish, so typically I'm not putting those in the tank, but if I was going to be, I would be putting them in dead last. Coming in at the number 9 spot on our 10 tips for choosing the right saltwater fish for you and your reef tank is planning for the future. Now, some fish, when you buy them at the store, they're very small, and as time goes on, they get bigger and bigger and bigger. So part of doing the research, figuring out, making sure that fish is a good fit for you and your tank is understanding what minimum tank size that fish is going to need as it matures. There's also saltwater fish out there that as they get older, they tend to get more aggressive. A perfect example of this is the 6-line wrasse, and the problem with them is they're not sexually dimorphic, so you can't tell the difference between the males and the females. And if you end up with a male, which you got a 50-50 shot, they are going to want to corral a group of females. And if they don't have that group of females, they're going to try to keep everybody in your tank in line, and that's not going to be a very good thing for the peace and serenity of your reef tank. Next up, we have choosing the saltwater fish on your experience level. Some fish require more care than others. So if you're a beginner, it's a really good idea to make sure that you are sticking to those beginner level saltwater fish so that you can kind of get comfortable with the whole thing and figure out what they need to be able to survive. It's probably not a good idea if you are a beginner to go out there and buy a fish that is considered needs of expert level, because that is just going to be a recipe for disaster. Coming in at the number 7 spot on our 10 tips for choosing the right saltwater fish for you and your reef tank is checking the compatibility of your saltwater fish with inverts. And when you're doing research on saltwater fish and you see that little thing on the bottom where it says not reef safe or reef safe with caution, more often than not, that doesn't have so much to do with corals as it has a lot more to do with inverts. And inverts are an incredibly important part of maintaining a reef tank, and if they're on the menu for some saltwater fish, you are going to have a very, very bad time. Turns into a very expensive meal very, very quickly. So make sure you do your research, understand what their feeding requirements are, and if you are falling in love with fish that are not reef safe and they're going to eat your inverts, maybe you might just want to avoid putting snails, hermit crabs, or even shrimp into your reef tank. Next up, we have considering the saltwater fish's activity level and behavior. Some fish like to swim back and forth constantly. Others like to hide more often than not. So understanding the needs of the fish is incredibly important to the overall success of your reef tank and the fish itself, and making sure that it's happy and has the things that it needs to have a long and full and happy life. A lot of folks, when they're thinking about getting a dog, they do a ton of research figuring out the correct breed that's going to suit their life. Really, we should be doing the same thing with fish and our reef tanks. Coming in at number 5, we have understanding the feeding requirements of the saltwater fish, and this is a big one because if you go and buy a saltwater fish and then you bring it home, put it in your reef tank, and you're trying to feed it pellets or flakes, and it's just not accepting the food at all, it might be that that saltwater fish needs something a little bit closer to what they're actually going to find in nature, especially if they're a wild-caught saltwater fish. And I see this all the time having the store, you know, somebody will come in, buy a clown, and they just like, all right, it's an omnivore, and they might not ask the question, hey, what are you feeding these fish? And that's incredibly important because all of the clowns that I bring into the store are aquacultured, and they have not seen a pellet yet. So that's something that you might have to slowly introduce to them over time to get them on pellets if you want something that's a little bit less demanding from a feeding standpoint. And that's things that you need to know to have the most success with that saltwater fish. Other fish out there that have interesting feeding requirements, such as your mandarins. Mandarins want to eat pods, and they'll eat, you know, some flatworms here and there, or even, you know, if you have an aquacultured one, they might eat some frozen, but they're primarily going to want to hunt pods, and you need to make sure that you have a very good population of pods or have access to pods that you can add to your tank over time, because they will deplete that population. Next up, we got making sure that your fish are reef safe or reef safe with caution or not reef safe at all. And what these terms mean is basically they're hobby generated terms that are indicating whether or not that fish potentially is not going to absolutely destroy your corals and your inverts, or the likelihood of it, because I've had fish that are classified as reef safe that developed a taste for zoanthids or LPS corals. It happens. But more often than not, if you feed them enough, they're not going to venture into figuring out the situation on their own. Coming in at the number 3 spot on our top 10 tips for choosing the right saltwater fish for you in your reef tank, we have understanding how to spot for signs of health issues with the saltwater fish. Understanding what ick, marine velvet, and flukes look like, just to name a few, is going to drastically increase your overall success with getting fish into your tank that are healthy and going to thrive. And one of the most important things that you can do for yourself before you actually even add the fish to your tank is quarantine it and make sure that you are giving it a period of time where you can observe it, make sure that it's healthy and that's not going to introduce any parasites or diseases into your reef tank. Something else that I want to touch on in this subject is also whether you're buying wild caught or aquaculture. Now, aquaculture saltwater fish are going to be more adapted to aquarium life, and they're just going to fit in a little bit better. They're just a better fit, especially for smaller reef tanks, than going and buying a wild caught fish and trying to force it into a much smaller tank, because the ocean is huge, and even the biggest of the aquariums that we keep are not really that big in relation to the ocean. Coming in at the number 2 spot on our top 10 tips for choosing the right saltwater fish for you and your reef tank, we have making sure that you're doing your research and understanding the compatibility of the livestock that you're trying to put into a very small confined space. A great example of this is, let's say you really are interested in hawkfish and you get yourself a flame hawk, put it in your tank, and then maybe a couple weeks down the road, you go to the local fish store, you see shrimp available, you grab yourself a shrimp, bring it home, and that hawkfish just hammers on that shrimp as soon as you put it into the tank. And then if you're lucky, you can get it out of the tank and then hopefully put it somewhere where it's going to be safe. This is a perfect example of not understanding the compatibility between not just saltwater fish, but saltwater fish and inverts, because in some cases, inverts are on the menu for certain species of saltwater fish. So it's incredibly important to make sure that you're doing your research so that you have a full understanding of the care requirements of your fish and your inverts, and all is well in your reef tank. And coming in at the number 1 spot on our top 10 tips for selecting the right saltwater fish for you and your reef tank is understanding the minimum tank size rule. It's incredibly important to make sure that you understand this when you are going in and making your fish wish list, understanding what the minimum tank size is for that fish, not trying to force a larger fish into a smaller aquarium, because that's just going to contribute to stress and kind of open the door to diseases and parasites taking hold of the fish. So make sure you do your research, make sure you understand what that fish is going to require for a space in a reef tank. Follow these tips and they're going to drastically increase your success with saltwater fish and maintaining a reef tank. But if you want to learn more about saltwater fish, check this video out. I will see you over there.